Good morning. This is Jason Dean, YouTube. Hope everyone's doing good. Jason Dean, a film fanatic. If you can, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel or like any of these weird videos I do, it's always greatly appreciated. And I love interacting with people through this whole format. And so if you get a chance, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. This has been a total blast. I've been going to Bull Moose a little bit more often since this year, with all the craziness in the world. The gig scenario and financial situation has definitely gotten better. So I've been able to go and spend money on movies a little bit more. So that's been really awesome. I just started working about a month ago. I just started working part-time at the Montessori school. There's two locations. It was a funny time because I haven't really talked about this so much before, but I figured I'd talk a little bit about it because it's all related to it's all related back to the films and music that I talk about, and all those things that entails. But so basically, about 2 years ago, I I used to work at the Camden Teen Center. I worked there for about almost 10 years, which is hard to believe. And during that time, I was a gigging musician, and things were going pretty good. And I've had experience teaching on my own for a while, and excuse me, and so I've been going back even a little bit further, probably about 10 or 11 years ago, which is hard to believe. I I was teaching a group of high school kids. Um, growing up and in my 20s and 30s, I never really thought about teaching music or teaching drum set. It was nothing. I never really thought about it for some reason, and over time, I did think about it as maybe another avenue that I could explore to maybe make an income and to try to further my own education. Um, and but I never thought I would really be great at it. I never thought it was going to be a strength of mine, and it was mostly due, because it was unknown territory. It was a new thing. I never really thought I could have the confidence or the ability to really do it. But it was probably about 10 or 11 years ago. I had gotten some random phone calls about some kids that were going to Belfast High School, mostly through their parents. They had, got my phone number, so they called me inquiring if I, taught drum lessons. So, and so right away at that time, I said yes, I'll do it. And you know, and I had a little bit of time to kind of get ready for it. So, kind of figured out a plan that I could do to try to maybe tackle and work with kids that were, you know, maybe beginners. I felt like a little bit more confident at that time that I could teach, you know, kids or people in general, maybe at a beginner level. So I ended up taking on my first student, and it was going great, and I learned a lot from it. It was hard at first to making an adjustment and trying to figure out a lesson plan or curriculum kind of a thing. But eventually I kind of got my bearings with it, and it was a lot of fun. And I had one student who had just started playing, so then over a period of about 5 or 6 months of that, I ended up getting a few more calls, and this was the time, like I've had this about 8 years ago or so. I built a building on my property, which is essentially just like a music studio, and I use it for like it's mostly used for like a rehearsal space, but it's evolved to like where I teach lessons out of it now, and it's a rehearsal space. And then over the last few years, it's evolved to where it's become like a recording studio. So I've done a lot of recording in there, and the most recent recordings that we did up until about this year, we mostly did a lot of recordings with probably about 4 or 5 different bands that I had been in over the years, and everything kind of became, or it never really went beyond the demo um, height. It everything kind of was like at a demo stage, but I never recorded like a full length album or an actual album that was released at my studio. But we did a lot of recording and experimenting, and surprisingly, I was like pretty happy with the sound of the room. And because I live on Route One, so especially during the summer, there's a lot of traffic and big trucks go by. So that was a thing of, you know, would that stuff leak through the recordings? But we never really had too many issues with that. And so we did a bunch of recordings, with a few different bands that I was in at the time that are now like not really, they're pretty much defunct now, but everything kind of only made it to like the demo level. Nothing was done to the completion of where we put out albums that were recorded here. But this past year, we, my friend Mike Whitehead and I, with the band Quantum, we recorded 2 albums in my studio in January of this year, and we recorded 2 albums and released the first one in Dreams I Saw, Chapter 1. We released that this past year, and that was the first time we released a full length album that was recorded entirely here at my house, and it came out really great. We put in a lot of time to for preparation. We sat on the material for a long time. We really tested it out as far as through gigs and various things. So so that was really great. And then we recorded a second album, and that's going to eventually probably come out sometime next year. But and eventually the studio. So I try to use the studio that I have. It's mainly like my own little practice space, and I do like writing in there. And then three or four bands that I play in, we rehearse in there during during the winter especially, or fall. But in general, it's a rehearsal space. I have a PA system there. I have uh, I have about 2 or 3 drum sets. So I have like a house drum set that I keep in the studio for practicing and rehearsing and stuff. And then I have another separate drum set that I use for gigs, and and a bunch of other odds and ends. And then I have my quantum stuff is all here, so I do all the quantum writing and rehearsing and stuff here. So, but when I first had my first student, it was all in my house. I have a relatively small house, but it's small, but it's fairly big too. I have it downstairs. So originally my practice space and rehearsal space was in my downstairs basement. So I would have my students come over, and we would do our lessons downstairs. So then over a period of time, I ended up getting a few more students, and at one point I had probably like 5 to 7 students, and they were mostly all high school kids. And it was great. It was a real cool learning experience. I feel like with teaching, you get a lot out of it. I feel like it's not, um, like that. There's definitely the role thing of where there's somebody who's inquiring about how to learn something or acquire a basic skill set. But for me, being the teacher, or quote unquote teacher, I get a lot out of it because I have to like stay up on what I'm doing, make sure I'm a little bit more confident on what I'm doing, and then I always have to like kind of stay ahead of the curve, especially with students that I've had that are doing really well. So it pushes me to really dive into the fundamentals even more, and to kind of push myself. So I always feel like in that scenario, I get a lot out of it too. So I end up um, more or less playing the role of the teacher, but I, in a lot of ways, feel like I'm the student also because I'm learning a lot through it too. So it's a really cool kind of give and take experience because you never stop learning regardless of your level. So then after a couple of years, my dad and I had worked on this project and we had this idea of building this space, and so we did that, and then I moved everything into there, and it's way easier because in my house there's two staircases. There's like a narrow staircase where you go to the basement, so it's kind of cumbersome. It's not very easy to access to if you're bringing big amps and all those kinds of things. And so with the music space, it's great because it's a direct load in, and I have a couple of doors. I have a little heater in there, so you can just load things in directly, and there's privacy because people don't have to come through the house and whatnot. So it worked out really really well. Plus the other thing is I don't have any neighbors, and so noise, sound. There's no issues around that with my neighbors because I don't really have any. So I feel really fortunate with that. I have a little heater in there, so I can use the. I turn that on during the winter and fall, so it's never an issue as far as that. And one thing I try not to take for granted is, because I'm kind of a lazy person sometimes. So one of the things I try not to take for granted is being able to have the luxury and time to like actually practice and work on music, in all its various forms, because I realize that like a lot of people that I know and other friends of mine who are drummers don't really have that kind of open schedule. Like they have lots of family commitments, or their situation of where they live, they're pretty restricted as far as how much noise they can make. So because I'm in a really fortunate situation, I try to always remind myself, like really, take advantage of that because I have that, space that I can do that without having any outside interference. So I feel really fortunate for that. But while I was teaching, I ended up getting a job at the teen center, and I worked there for about almost 10 years. And it was in Camden, and I worked there, and I was basically uh, my position was a cross between a babysitter slash counselor, and basically we worked with high school kids, and we would hang out with the kids, play games with them, and like kind of intervene, when there are problems, kids who might have had a conflict with another kid, or various things that are happening at home. We'd have to meet with the parents all the time, uh, and so it was a really great experience, and I learned a lot. And then also the first few years, especially the first 5 years or so that I was there at the teen center, I started working. I started doing a lot of music there. I started teaching a lot there, and we were also running these music programs. I had a drum ensemble, and then another coworker of mine who was a musician, he had a regular full band ensemble, and it was great. I mean, it was a really cool learning experience, and the space was great because there was a stage and a nice like little, almost like mini theater inside the teen center. So we did that for quite a few years, where I would teach lessons in there. I would do these like workshops, and then also like we would do these with our ensembles that we had. We would do these performances. So like the parents would come in and they'd bring in baked goods, and then we'd act. It would become like more or less like a fundraiser for the teen center. So it was a very cool experience, and so I had experience teaching like younger kids, mostly high school kids at that time, and then throughout the years I've taught people that are closer to my age and various other ages. Um, and then about 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I got hired on to teach at Bay Chamber Music, which is an amazing place, one of the best music schools, probably the best music school around. And I ended up teaching there for a while, and then over a couple of years I started getting quite a few students there, and I was able to, and I started to cut back on my hours at the teen center. And my dream and my goal was to, eventually phase out, the quote unquote regular day job and just focus on music, and through teaching and various other things. And then the pandemic hit, and then I tried to transition to try to do the whole online teaching thing, and that was really really tough, a real big challenge, and it didn't really work out. So I ended up losing all my students, and then when things eventually started to open up again, and then the teen center eventually closed, like for good. So eventually I got, tried to get into a place of where I could maybe build up some more students, and eventually I had a couple more private students, and then also I was back at Bay Chamber teaching a little bit, but I basically lost about ten students at one point. And so it was a hard adjustment, and it was a real tough period, like for most people during the pandemic. So I basically was at ground zero again, and I had to kind of repurpose what I was doing and try to shift my focus onto trying to build stuff up again. And then I ended up working at the Rockland YMCA, and I ended up getting a cleaning job there. And so I was working there part time, but it was a tough schedule because I was working nights, and that's not really conducive to being a musician. But it had a flexibility to it to where I could switch days and go in later. So I did that for about a year, a little over a year and a half, almost 2 years, of where I eventually started playing gigs, and I started becoming more active with music again. Uh, I started, doing both of those jobs together, and it got to be really really tough. And then eventually I was not at the Y anymore. But this summer worked out really well, which I was really really surprised. Financially, there were so many gigs, and out of the years that I had been up here, I found that this year was probably the best year I've ever had up here, as far as, just looking at the economics, as far as making money playing music. I felt like it was the best. It was definitely the best summer I ever had. Very, very surprising considering all the chaos that's going on in the world. So, and then on the side, I was teaching a little bit. I lost my day job at the Y, but then recently I just got another part-time job at the Montessori school. And the Montessori school is a pretty amazing place. It's really close to my house, and I work in the aftercare department. I basically hang out and take care of um, younger kids, and it's wonderful. It's an amazing place, amazing people. It's an amazing facility. I really love it, and it's even more of I feel like it's even more of a to a degree easier or less stressful position than I had before at the teen center, and it's got a lot of flexibility, and it's really close to my house, and um, it's great. So it's been even easier of an adjustment as far as trying to do the music thing also. And I'm still, eventually trying to build up. I have a few students now that I have year round, and I've been trying to, build that up more, and then eventually hopefully get more students and go from there, and all those kinds of things. But financially things have been better, so I've been able to go to Pull Moose Music and spend more money on movies. So it's been great. I've been doing more and more movies. I've been buying more movies. So I just went there on Sunday, which was fantastic. And I did a movie review yesterday on a film that I did, that I had recently bought, called Thriller: A Cruel Picture, which is just an amazing exploitation movie that I never seen, this Swedish film. So if you get a chance, check out the review, and definitely check out that movie. It's amazing. It's definitely now, I think, on my top 10 list. It's just phenomenal movie. And getting back to a little bit more music stuff before I get into this next movie, I as far as the quantum stuff goes, like this year has been phenomenal, and you know, really can't thank people enough for their support for this weird thing that we do, and that I've been doing for a long time with my friend Mike Whitehead. we had our album release this summer in June, and then we had a we had a really good summer playing lots of gigs, and we sold a lot of copies of the new album. We sold pretty much sold out of our physical copies. We basically, whenever I put out an album up until this point, we usually do like physical copies, like CDs, or we do, and then we also have them digitally available on Bandcamp. And the one cool thing is that our online sales have definitely increased a lot more this year. I've been trying to promote that a little bit more, and that took off a lot more this year than in the uh, previous years. And the shows were really fantastic, and I feel like we made some new fans as we were going, and it helped with the sales overall of the album. So really great. So lately there's been obviously some downtime after the summer, and I felt like there were times during the summer where we were kind of riding a little bit of a wave, and there was like a lot of momentum building, and so coming out of the summer where it felt like that was a big thing, kind of riding a wave, and I've been thinking about trying to, you know, keep that going to a degree. So right now, um, I'm in the midst now of booking some more shows, so stay tuned. There'll be some more dates coming up at some point, probably pretty soon. So moving forward, I think what I want to do is to try to play some more shows, keep things alive. It probably won't be as busy and as prolific as it was during the summer, unfortunately. But I want to kind of keep things going, and I've been writing some new tunes, which has been really great for Quantum, and trying to keep that whole thing alive and breathing, and not to go back to a dormant place anymore. So yeah, stay tuned. There'll be more shows coming up at some point with that band, and um, and then also moving forward, the other thing is thinking about when we will be putting out the second album, or chapter two of In Dreams We Saw, because we have a whole album that's like sitting, uh, that's all done and mixed and mastered, and just basically I just need to release it and put it out. So that's going to be exciting when we do that. Probably not going to do that during the winter or fall. It'll probably be during when the weather is warm again. So that will be, I think that will be a really fun time. I think a lot about doing moving forward. I've been in contact with a lot of, which has been great, more electronic artists in the area. Like suddenly there's about five or six different groups that I know of. So right now I'm coordinating with trying to do more things like that with groups. And whenever we do our the next album that is sitting in the on the back burner right now, that's all ready to go, and we do decide on a time frame or place to do our next album release, which I think I want to do. It will probably be in that kind of context or format. We'll have it at a place or a show where there's a bunch of other bands playing, and we'll do it that way. And so stay tuned for that. That will be really exciting. And yeah, so this brings me to this movie, this amazing film, The Brotherhood of Satan. An amazing film. This is a film I've never seen before. I had heard about over the years, uh, especially the last couple of years. I've heard a lot about it, and it keeps coming up. It was one of those films. It came out in 1971, and it was directed by Bernard McKivity. McKivity. Bernard McKivity. It came out in 1971, and it's kind of looked at and regarded as, during the 70s there was, kind of, I guess to a degree, it started with Rosemary's Baby, which came out in the 60s, but there was a whole slew of all of these, like, quote unquote satanic exploitation horror movies that came out after that movie. Movies like, well, Rosemary's Baby. I think, kind of ushered in that movement. But then, like the Brotherhood of Satan, there's um, Satan's Blood, uh, Satanico Pandemonium. I did a review on, which is just an amazing movie. So many great movies, but there were a ton of movies during the '70s that kind of all like were these horror exploitation knockoff movies to a degree. The Devil's Reign is another one, which is just an amazing movie. And there was a whole ton of movies that came out in the '70s that were these horror satanic, themed exploitation movies that kind of, tried to be to a degree Rosemary's Baby. Like they obviously were not as well done, and they were like kind of knockoffs, but they're amazing, and they're super sleazy, and especially Satan's Blood. Like that movie is just amazing. But there is a whole period during the '70s for about 10 years where there was so many of these like satanic oriented exploitation movies came out, and just amazing. And I've been acquiring these films more and more, and I've done reviews. I've done reviews on Satan's Blood, which is unbelievable. It's an amazing film. Satanico Pandemonium. I did a review on that one. I also did a review on The Devil's Reign, which is just an amazing movie. And then there were also movies in the '80s that came out that were kind of inspired by those, like The Unholy. Um, Such a great period of kind of one of my favorite periods of in the world of horror exploitation. Um, but Satan's Blood is amazing. I never seen it. And looking this movie up and doing some research about it, it was looked at as that movie that kind of traced that lineage of when these kinds of films kind of became popular. It came out shortly after Rosemary's Baby, and it's a cross between a higher quality or a highbrow horror film, but then it's also very super low budget, and it's also in a lot of ways considered to be an exploitation movie. Um, and then eventually after that, a lot of other films came out, especially through a lot of European films came out. But this, I believe that this film was one of the films that's kind of looked at as like kind of bridging the gap from the bigger Hollywood horror-based films, such as like Rosemary's Baby, to like the more grindhouse films. And I got this on Blu-ray, and the collection is amazing. Like there's a lot of cool interviews, um, and it's a really really well done movie. It's basically centered on this town of where these children suddenly start disappearing, and they're they're which leads to this whole town trying to investigate as to why these children are disappearing, and there's a slew of all of these mysterious murders that happen, and they discover that there's like this cult that are like these supposed Satanists that are abducting these children. uh, and but the interesting thing about it is uh, the whole like kind of traditional tropes of what you see in you know quote unquote satanic exploitation films, where there's like human sacrifice and pentagrams and blood and copious amounts of sex and orgies. This film is pretty different. It has a real different take on it, and it's very original. And the uh, and it doesn't really have those typical tropes, even though it does those, or it shows those kinds of things, or has those elements, but it does it in its own in a very unique way. But it's still got like the ritual scenes are amazing. Like the cinematography for this film is pretty spectacular. I was pretty blown away. There's a lot of great scenes of where there's all these great panoramic shots, particularly when it comes to like where there's like the ritual um, scenario, and a lot of big giant wide shots, and beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. The music is really great. The script is great. It's a really great story. Really impressive, and it's got this totally bizarre kind of twist on like the whole tale of this cult. and it's total 70s. It's like I love that this is like 1971, and it totally feels, like that era, which is, I don't know, 70s and 80s. I don't know what it is. Like I always say, I love and try to stay up on a lot of new movies, and there's been some amazing movies that have been coming out just recently. But there's something, I don't know what it is, but there's something about this period of these exploitation movies that came out in the 70s and 80s. Like you just can't beat it. It's just got this gritty grindhouse quality, and the low budget quality. The movies are really raw. There's always an element of sleaziness to it, and there's always an element of cheese that goes on, but it all adds to the charm, and I just feel like there's a lot of cool imagination used, and there weren't a lot for a lot of these films because of the budgets. They were limited to how long they could shoot the film, so a lot of these films were a lot of scenes were shot with them not being able to use many takes. So it's got that kind of quality to it where it's like kind of guerrilla style. But just yeah, this is a killer movie. I'm super excited. Because this is a movie again I had said I had heard about, and I had actually seen in the store for quite a while. And then I finally bought it the other day, and I was like, I need to see this. And I was a little bit concerned. I do like newer stuff, newer things, but I try to, when I go to Blue Moose, typically I try to get like the old stuff, like the 60s, 70s, 80s. I try to always get stuff from around then. When I first picked this up, I kind of thought this was like a remake, something that came out fairly recently, so I was like hesitant to buy it. But then I checked it out, and it was from 1971, so I was like, oh, I need to buy it. But yeah, and there's some great great interviews on here. It's a great packaging. It's got the little slip cover, and great quality. And Arrow is definitely one of the best companies right now as far as putting out all these great exploitation movies. There's so many, and then in the cover it's got the original artwork. It's like 1970s, full on killer movie. Super excited I bought this, and if you haven't seen this, do yourself a favor, because this is a trip. It's a killer movie. So 1971, Brotherhood of Satan. Definitely check this out. This is Jason Dean. Thanks again for checking out the page, and if you get a chance, please like and subscribe to my Film Fanatic Jason Dean page, and we will see you next time. Peace.